Hey class, welcome back. I hope you guys are all doing well and staying safe and healthy during this time. Today we're going to be looking at the Pacific Theater. We'll be looking at the battles and operations that take place after the bombing of Pearl Harbor and the different phases of the Pacific Theater. Everything from some of the naval attacks to the island hopping campaign to the bombing of mainland Japan. And so we'll be taking a look at some of those details. One of the interesting things to point out about the Japanese invasion of the Pacific is that they expanded so far, taking all of these islands, and that they actually moved kind of northeast, and they ended up invading two of the Aleutian Islands, which is part of Alaska. Now, Alaska was not a state yet in the United States, but it was a U.S. territory, and it was the only place in the United States that the Japanese actually invaded, where they had Japanese soldiers on the ground in a U.S. territory. Was the Aleutian Islands in Alaska. Just kind of an interesting note, but it just shows the expanse of the Japanese Empire. They were all the way down to threatening Australia, which on the map coming up, you'll see that. And they go all the way down to threatening Australia, and they're all the way up to Alaska, and this vast area of the Pacific is all under their control until the United States starts pushing them back in these different phases with the island hopping. So we'll be looking at that today. So stay tuned for the PowerPoint. Okay, class, we're going to have the PowerPoint lecture on the Second World War, Part 3. In this lecture, we're going to be talking about the Pacific War. And here's just an overall map of the Pacific War and what takes place over the next couple of years, from December of 7th, 1941 to August of 45. So over here's Hawaii on the very edge of the map, and you can just see the movements here of the United States over the couple of years. It's broken into two forces. You have a force here which is under Nimitz. He's the overall commander for this force. It's like a northern force. And then down here is another force under the command of MacArthur. And even though there's island hopping going on up here in the north with Tarawa and Guam and Saipan and all of that, and even Iwo Jima, there's a lot of island hopping down here in the southern part with Guadalcanal, Bougainville, Rabaul, Battle of Coral Sea is a naval battle. And they move across here with New Guinea, up to the Philippines, and then to Okinawa. So just kind of give you an overview there. And you see up here, just interesting, this is the only part of a Japanese invasion. In 1942, the Japanese invade some of the Aleutian Islands, which is part of Alaska. Now, Alaska's not a state yet, but this was U.S. territory, and they actually invaded that. They landed on that. Okay, so when we look at the Pacific War, we look at some different phases of the war. It's basically broken into four main phases, the last phase being very short because it's just an intense bombing of Japan. But the first phase is a Japanese offensive from December 7th of 1941 to June of 1942. Now, the Japanese were already on the offensive in China and French Indonesia, which is like today's Vietnam. They were already on the offensive, but because we're talking about the Pacific War with the United States, they go on the offensive against the U.S. on December 7th of 1941 with the bombing of Pearl Harbor. And that continues until June of 1942. The Japanese are just really expanding. The Allies are backpedaling. The United States is not anywhere near a good war footing to take the war to Japan. So it takes some time to get the war machine of the United States up and going. So the Japanese are out there just taking control of the Pacific. It looks like the bombing of Pearl Harbor was a success for them because after Pearl Harbor, they were able to conquer much of the Pacific. But then Phase 2 occurs and the Allies regroup from June 1942 to mid-1943. The Allies regroup and get going with some smaller actions. But then from mid-1943 to September of 1945 is a main push by the United States across the Pacific, and this is where you start seeing the serious island hopping campaigns across the Pacific, where the United States goes from one island to another, and I'll talk about that in a second. And then you move into Phase 4 with the intense bombing of Japan, a lot of firebombing of the Japanese cities by the U.S., and then obviously that's going to conclude with the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. All right, Phase 1, the Japanese offensive from December 7th of 41 to June of 42. Again, another map here of the world. Over here is Hawaii with Pearl Harbor. And you see the Japanese offensive, and they obviously, here's Japan, here's Manchuria, and areas of China that they've taken, and here's Indochina, which is today's Vietnam. They took control of that. There's some other pockets that they have. But they decided to move in, and they move into the Philippines. Now, the Philippines was owned by the United States, and the Philippines, MacArthur was actually over there, and he ended up having to evacuate, and he vowed that he would return. But they move all along here. They take all these islands. Okay, so for the Japanese offensive, we have the bombing of Pearl Harbor. There's the Battle of Wake Island and Guam, which they took. The Japanese take the Philippines, Hong Kong, Malaya, Singapore, Burma, Borneo. They moved all the way down close to Australia, so Australia is threatened. Now, Australia is part of Greater Britain, so the Australians are going to be allied with Great Britain. And the Japanese were finally stopped at the Battle of the Coral Sea and the Battle of Midway. I'm going to go back to that map. Here's the Battle of Midway over here. The Japanese were stopped there, and then the Battle of Coral Sea is down here. So you see they've expanded all through this. Now, the Battle of Midway is, for the most part, is a naval battle. There's a lot of air battles going on from the aircraft carriers. So really, this line where the Japanese expanded, this is their expansion line, which they took quite a bit, they end up being stopped. Okay, so here's another map of that controlled area. So they take all of this, so obviously threatening Australia. All the way down here, this is where the U.S. begins. For the most part, they begin their ground forces down here with the invasion of Guadalcanal and the Solomon Island chain. And it's quite a bit of area that the Japanese take control of. Phase 2, the Allies regroup from June of 42 to mid of 43. And like I said, they stopped the Japanese at the Battle of the Coral Sea. If they did not stop them there, they probably would have moved down in here into attempting to take anyway, northern Australia and the rest of these islands down here. Now, this is all British controlled. I mean, Australia is part of Great Britain. So the United States came in and stopped the Japanese here, and stopped the Japanese here. And you can see the two arms of attack all the way to 1945. Okay, so it begins with the Guadalcanal campaign. Again, we don't have a lot of time to get into all of this. You just imagine in your mind the Marines landing on the island, battling the Japanese in the jungles of Guadalcanal. It begins the island hopping strategy, and this is a definition of island hopping: the Allied use of ships, submarines, and aircraft to block and isolate Japanese bases, and reducing the ability to resupply by leapfrogging past some of the islands and attacking others. This overall strategy was simultaneously moving towards Japan. And so there was a overall strategy of hopping from island to island. If the island was deemed not a threat, or they could isolate that island, they wouldn't even bother attacking it. They would just bypass it. So now you have an island with Japanese forces on it that is now cut off from their main supply. The way that the United States would take these islands that they would land on was by the use of marine amphibious landings to invade the island. They would have massive naval presence to give them naval support, air presence to give them air support, and the Marines would go on in a ground invasion of an island. Again, they would bypass other islands that they deemed as not a threat, and those island garrisons would then wither on the vine, so to speak. Again, just another map. We have a lot of maps for World War II. Here's this northern force under Nimitz that would go in and move along here. Now these arrows here, that would be like bombing runs. The United States never invaded Japan. The forces never invaded Japan. They did invade Iwo Jima. They invaded Okinawa. But these would be bombing attacks by airplanes. And then down here is the southern force, and this would be a lot of island hopping going on down here. And they would just hop free Philippines. So just kind of give you an idea of island hopping. Some pictures. And these are pictures you're probably familiar with. The Marines landing on the beaches, fighting in the jungles. Okay, the third phase was the U.S. offensive of 43 to 45. And this strategy involved two forces, which I mentioned. Force 1 was under General Douglas MacArthur. That was the Solomon Islands campaign, the New Guinea campaign, the Philippines campaign. That would be right here. This is MacArthur. So here's Solomon, here's Papua New Guinea, and here's the Philippines. So this is MacArthur's domain. The second one is under Admiral Chester Nimitz. This was still islands that they attacked. The Marines still attacked islands through this campaign, but it was definitely a lot more naval engagements, and the area is just more ocean than islands. So this is under Nimitz, and his plan was to draw the Japanese Navy away from the islands' garrisons. You have the Battle of Philippine Sea and the Battle of Leyte Gulf. Okay, so this is Nimitz. And again, his idea was that the Navy, which would be coming down here to supply these islands, they would be drawn away to have to fight the U.S. Navy. And then the forces combine after the U.S. capture of the Philippines, and they move towards Japan with the Battle of Iwo Jima and Battle of Okinawa, which is right here. So the forces, after the United States take Philippines, there's nothing really standing in their way anymore, so they combine forces and they attack up here now, moving towards Japan. So the United States has now pushed the Japanese forces back. Just another map of what I've been saying. Okay, so here's a naval battle up here. This is MacArthur right there, and he's returning to the Philippines. He vowed to return. So this was kind of a famous picture of him returning back to the Philippines. Very famous picture, the raising of the flag on Iwo Jima up on Mount Suribachi. Just some more Marines here fighting on Iwo Jima. And then the fourth phase is the intense bombing of Japan, which is basically 2 months. Even though the U.S. has been bombing Japan for a little while, there was just an intense bombing of Japan because the United States is now close to Japan. They've established air bases on some islands, and they were able to fly and bomb Japan. So firebombing began in 1943, but increased as U.S. forces captured islands and they used or built air bases for bombing. The technique here was called firebombing because the bombs they used were incendiary cluster bombs. basically what this would be a bomb that when it explodes causes massive, instead of an explosion, it would cause more of a fire. And a lot of structures in the cities were made of wood, and so the fires raged and spread, and they increased into basically like firestorms, where there'd be like no way of stopping it. There was just so much ordnance being dropped, and so large fires being lit and consuming, that the cities would basically be consumed in a firestorm. The bombings culminated with the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which would bring an end to the war. And we'll, like I said in the previous lecture, we will have a PowerPoint of kind of like the conclusion of the war with the fall of all of the Axis forces. Here's a map of the bombings of Japan, just a kind of the strategy that they used. So it was not just like a small area that was bombed. They bombed the cities all along Japan. And by this time in the war, Japan was hurting for resources, was hurting for I'm sorry, this is supposed to say phase 4. I'm not sure why. I copied the slide and forgot to change the top of it. They were hurting for resources, and the firebombing of the cities would have killed a lot of civilians, a lot of industry, especially during the cities along the coast. Here's some pictures of the firebombings. This picture here this is Tokyo, and this is not clouds. This is smoke from vast parts of the city on fire. Here's charred bodies. Okay, so that's it for this PowerPoint. I'll see you in a second. Okay, class, that's going to be it for today. We got a good basis on the Japanese and the Pacific Theater, and like I've said in the other presentation, that we're going to be kind of drawing all of this to a conclusion with the end of the war, and so we'll have a separate PowerPoint on the fall of Japan, on the fall of Germany, all that. That'll be a separate PowerPoint. So what we're doing is we're basically stopping just short of their fall, and so we'll be looking at Japan's fall in a little bit with the atomic bombings. Next time we are going to be looking at the other side of the European theater, which is going to be Operation Barbarossa and the invasion of Russia by the German forces. We'll have a whole PowerPoint lecture just on that next time. Other than that, I hope you guys are doing well. Please take care. Bye.